Hello, my name is Lance Simon, and I am an undergrad at Texas State University. I will be presenting Improving Automated Plant Seeding through Design and Development of Automated Seeder and Route Optimization. The co-authors of this work are Bahram Asiabanpour and Mark Summers. This presentation will provide an introduction, the objective of the project, the methodology of the seeder system development and software application improvements, the results of the project conclusion, and references and acknowledgments. The global population is expected to reach 9.7 billion people by the year 2050. With this fast-growing population, limited access to fresh water, fertile land, and increasing price of energy and labor, new methods and resources are required to increase food production. Among these methods is utilizing automation in farming, which has been on the rise for about 20 years. By adopting methods such as seeding drones and autonomous machines, farmers have been able to improve productivity and reduce waste and cost. In this project, an open-source robotic seeder, the FarmBot Genesis, was utilized, modified, and improved upon to enhance the original function of planting seeds in their designated locations. The FarmBot performed repetitive movements to pick up and transfer seeds. This, in conjunction with the undefined travel path, rendered the FarmBot inefficient. Alongside the repetitive movements, the FarmBot's user interface required intensive interaction from the user to ensure proper operation. The objective of this research was to provide improvements to the FarmBot Genesis, allowing it to operate more efficiently and reduce human interaction. This was done by designing and manufacturing alternative end effectors, generating sequences that could be duplicated to increase the FarmBot's functionality, and adjusting the motor settings of the FarmBot to decrease the amount of time consumed navigating through the garden. To design improved end effectors, we defined issues that reduced the FarmBot's efficiency within the seeding operation, brainstormed concepts to erase the issues that were identified, modeled and manufactured prototypes, and then tested the prototypes and made improvements to get our final design. The original seeding end effector utilized a vacuum pump and seeding bay to house and transfer seeds. The dependency of the seed bay and vacuum pump consumed an excessive amount of time and distance. While allowing the FarmBot to plant seeds in the designated test area, containing 54 seed locations, it was determined that the planting operation consumed 19,000 millimeters in 806 seconds. While this operation was being observed, the amount of distance and time consumed retrieving seeds were also collected. This data indicated that 49% of the distance consumed was required to pick up seeds, and 97% of the time consumed during the planting operation was consumed while retrieving the seeds as well. To improve the seeding operation, concepts were generated with the main focus of housing and dispensing seeds directly from the end effector. This would eliminate the repetitive movements of the retrieving seeds, which would decrease the movements performed and reduce operational time. Along with the two main factors, generated designs need to be lightweight and compact, allowing them to maintain a connection to the universal tool mount, or UTM, and be placed along the tool bay attached to the Y-axis gantry post-use. We also wanted the FarmBot to have the ability to dispense a variety of seeds, so two concepts were generated, one for small seeds, mainly basil, and another for larger seeds. The brainstorm concepts were taken from paper and designed within SolidWorks to produce prototypes. The prototypes were produced using a CraftBot 3D printer to ensure lightweight components at a low price. The model on the right is the initial small seed end effector. The design had simplicity at its forefront. The intention was to replicate an efficient manual seeding technique and adopt it to the FarmBot to plant basil seeds. This concept utilized outsourced components with minimal 3D printing. Parallel to the concept generation, commercial seed injectors were popularly used to reduce human labor while filling a garden. They allowed for quick planting of multiple seeds within a garden bed, reduced the amount of time seeding. They were lightweight, allowed for seed storage, and were low cost. The seed injector paired with an actuator provided the desired seeding technique. By connecting the ground and power cables of the actuator to two screws extruded from the top of the end effector, power was delivered through pogo pins within the UTM. This would allow the actuator to press on the seed injector and dispense the appropriate number of seeds. The original seed injector that was used for the basil seeds crushed the larger seeds. To address the issue, the system was modified and a mechanism like a gumball machine was adopted to the system. For seeds larger than the base, an efficient way of storing the batch and placing individual seeds were pursued. The model on the right is the initial large seeder design. Our modified design for planting larger seeds utilized a spiral connected to a rotating plate, much like a gumball machine. Seeds would be stored within the cylindrical housing, piling on the spiral waiting to be dispensed. With the use of a gear motor, power would be delivered through pogo pin inside the UTM, allowing the spiral to rotate and reveal a hole large enough for a variety of seed sizes and shapes. The initial end effector concepts were tested by connecting the actuator and the gear motor to a power supply. They would receive power for about a second, then the connection was removed. This allowed an analysis of how many seeds were being dispensed. The small seed end effector initially produced around 7 seeds each time it was given power. To improve our design, we increased the distance between the actuator and the seed injector to reduce the number of seeds being dispensed. For the large seeder, many seeds would get crushed as the spiral rotated. To correct this, walls on the outer portion of the spiral were inserted along with a wall behind the dispensing hole. After testing the dispensing methods, a housing test was conducted. By manually placing end effectors in the tooling bay, we observed how well they fit. The small seed end effector was not able to sit upright, which would prevent any plausible connection to the UTM. So we lowered the grooves that stationed the end effector to the tooling bay, allowing room below the end effector as shown in the picture on the right. The large seed end effector had no issues being stored on the gantry, so only the spiral was improved upon. After all the tests were conducted and improvements were implemented, the final designs were manufactured using the Objet 260 resin printer to produce accurate parts. With the FarmBot Genesis being an open source machine, they provided a web application that is used to operate the FarmBot. The software improvements were conducted through 4 stages: defining seed locations, defining tool locations, generating sequences, and adjusting the motor settings. Starting with stage 1, defining seed locations, a safe X and Y coordinate were determined to ensure that the initial seed location was accessible by the UTM. Once the initial location was determined, a tub containing horticube pods were placed in that area with the first seed location placed directly under the UTM. With the horticube pods inside the tub, there consist of 9 rows and 6 columns, all equidistant apart. Inputting this information in the garden creation module, the garden layout was allowed to be properly filled to match the FarmBot's garden bed. This was then saved as the Thai basil group for easy operation execution. After the seed locations were defined, the tools that would be utilized needed a place along the y-axis gantry in the tooling bay. These locations were determined by attaching the tool to the gantry and manually moving the FarmBot over the tool. When the UTM was able to pick up the tools with the magnets inside the UTM, the location would be saved by hitting the blue button in the tooling module. To ensure that the defined location was correct, the FarmBot was manually programmed to remove the tool and put the tool back by moving along the x-axis. If there was an issue of the tool getting caught or the tool hitting the gantry, the tool was placed back on the tooling bay, and the method of determining the location was repeated with an alternate Z coordinate. This process was then repeated for each tool that would be potentially used. Having both the tool and seed locations defined, the FarmBot was ready to have sequences generated. By following the manual process of seeding a garden, instructions were easily converted into process steps allowing the FarmBot to perform any gardening task. The initial process of setting up the planting sequence started with creating a sequence to plant individual seed. This was done by defining a seed location as an external location, then adding the plant command, which will provide power to a pogo pins, allowing the seeds to be dispensed. Once the seeds have been placed, a marked as command was inserted. This allowed the FarmBot to know that a seed had been placed in the desired location. The FarmBot was then commanded to move back above the externally defined location. With the plant a seed sequence complete, a new sequence was created to fill every plant location within the garden. This sequence started by picking up the tooling end effector, then executing the plant a seed sequence for all the plants stored within the Thai basil group. This command would provide instructions to move to each seed location and actuate above each location dispensing seeds. This sequence ended with the drop-off tool command, which placed the tooling end effector back in the tooling bay and moved the UTM to home. This sequence was then duplicated and altered to perform any necessary gardening tasks. Upon completing the sequence generation, the initial motor settings needed to be adjusted. Since the distance between seed locations was very short, we wanted to reduce the amount of time consumed going to or finding the home location. This was done by adjusting the following settings: the max speed, the maximum and minimum speed towards home, and the acceleration towards home. These settings were tested by moving the FarmBot along the perimeter of the garden bed from point A to B, B to C, and C to A, as shown in the bottom image. While the FarmBot was conducting the test, times were collected to determine the amount of time consumed during the operation. After the test was conducted, each of the settings were adjusted individually. Then the test was repeated. This continued until the FarmBot's movements became unstable, allowing us to determine the most optimized settings. With the final seeding end effectors manufactured, the FarmBot was tasked with performing the planting operation within the testing area using both the small and large seed end effectors. As the FarmBot was operating, the total distance traveled and the distance between seed locations were collected. This test showed that the FarmBot reduced its total distance consumption to 1,600 millimeters and was able to maintain a constant distance between seeding locations. While the FarmBot's travel distance was being analyzed, it was also being timed to observe how quickly it was able to perform its task. When the FarmBot had finished planting all seeds in their designated locations, the time was stopped and displayed that the operation was performed in about 69 seconds. On the software side, by adjusting the FarmBot's X and Y axis max and min homing speed to 80 millimeters per second and increasing the X and Y max speed to 150 millimeters per second, the find home or go to home operation was performed within half the original time. In addition to the time reduction from the motor adjustments, the user is easily able to adjust or change sequences by changing the execute command within the sequence creation module. This allows the user to easily modify the FarmBot's functionality. And the addition of pinning the created sequences to the control module allowed the user to perform gardening tasks with the push of the run button. The current research aimed to improve the FarmBot efficiency by designing seeding end effectors and reducing the user interface complexity. By observing the FarmBot's original setup, flaws were found within its operational components, such as redundant movements and time-consuming operations. Through the implementations provided by the end effector designs, the distance traveled was reduced by 92%, and the time consumed during the planting operation was reduced by 91%. In addition to the reduction in time and distance, the user interface reduced its complexity, allowing the user to easily run gardening operations with the push of a button on the main control panel. These modifications allowed the FarmBot to improve appliance efficiency by producing a sample of the field garden and be user operated within less time. The modifications provided were based upon the FarmBot's objective at Texas State University. The FarmBot could continuously grow in its efficiency. The implementations provided exemplify how efficient the FarmBot could be.